Hi everybody, my name is Emily Gottlieb. Thank you for coming to my talk on the positive effects of the introduced Balanus glandula on the native Siphonaria Lessonii in the high intertidal of Argentina. I conducted this research under a Fulbright grant in 2019, and I would like to thank my colleagues and co-authors in Argentina. Limpets use substrate roughness elements as resting sites during periods of inactivity, particularly during low tides. Rough elements may include cracks or crevices in the rock or sessile organisms. The introduced barnacle Balanus glandula accounts for much of the roughness in the high rocky intertidal zones of Argentina. We studied the ecosystem engineering effects of the introduced barnacle on a native limpet, Siphonaria lessonii. We evaluated whether the introduced barnacles have a direct positive effect on the densities of the native limpet. We also looked at whether the barnacles have a positive effect on the algal growth, thereby indirectly affecting limpet densities. Surveys were conducted on flat, horizontal, high intertidal platforms where barnacles and limpets were present. These surveys were conducted at 19 sites in Buenos Aires, Rio Negro, and Chubut provinces. At 8 sites, surface rugosity was measured. Experiments were conducted at one site in Buenos Aires province from April to June 2019. In one experiment, barnacles were removed and mimic epoxy barnacles were added to determine if limpets positively responded to the structure of the barnacles. In a second experiment, barnacles were removed and limpets were removed and excluded from plots to determine the relative algal growth between plots with barnacles present and absent. Similar surveys and experiments were conducted in Ushuaia, Tierra del Fuego province, where 2 species of Siphonaria, Lessonii and lateralis, and a native barnacle, Nodothalamus scabrosus, are found in the high intertidal zone. Limpet densities were positively related to barnacle densities in 11 out of 19 sites surveyed in Buenos Aires, Rio Negro, and Chubut provinces. Non-significant positive relationships were found at sites with relatively low limpet densities and/or rough basal substrate. A high proportion, 40.18% to 94.25% of limpets at each site were adjacent to barnacles. In our first experiment, limpets positively responded to the addition of epoxy barnacle mimics into barnacle-free areas. This graph shows that the percentage of limpets adjacent to real barnacles was similar to the percentage of limpets adjacent to mimic barnacles in experimental plots after 1 month. In our second experiment, we had 5 replicates of 4 plots, which included a control plot, experimental plots with barnacles removed and limpets removed but not excluded, an experimental plot with barnacles removed and limpets removed and excluded, and finally an experimental plot where the barnacles were left and the limpets were removed and excluded. After 2 months, we measured algal growth by analyzing the chlorophyll A concentration from rock chips and by collecting and dry weighing the macroalgae from each plot. Barnacle removal with limpet exclusion led to decreased algal growth. The surveys and experiments in Tierra del Fuego province revealed similar patterns between the 2 species of Siphonaria and the native barnacle found there. In conclusion, we found that barnacles increase surface roughness in the high intertidal, providing refuge for limpets. Barnacles may confer shade, temperature control, and increase surface moisture, all of which are beneficial to the limpets as they fight desiccation in the dry wind during low tide. The presence of the introduced barnacles increases algal biomass, which indirectly drives the positive relationship between barnacles and limpet densities. Limpets graze on algae. Consequent increases of limpet density in barnacle-dense areas decreases algal biomass. Thank you for attending my talk. I hope that you found it interesting and informative. Please feel free to contact me via email with any follow-up questions. Thank you again sincerely to my co-authors and to the United States Fulbright Program and to the Fulbright Commission of Argentina. Enjoy the rest of the conference.